Hi, and welcome to Love, Life, and Lies. I'm your host, Kevin Evans, and today we have Tim Roberts back as a guest with us. He is a successful businessman, married for 40 years, has 5 kids and 8 grandkids, and today we're going to talk about keys to communication. Welcome, Tim.
Hey, good to be back.
Loved you on the last episode. We got really deep into successful relationships. It was a lot of fun. We got pretty deep there.
Yeah.
And one of the things we were talking about was communication. So I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into that subject a little bit. Because communication, I think a lot of people have it wrong. And correct me if your vision is a little different, but a lot of people think communication is just talking to somebody else. And really, communication involves both verbal and nonverbal. And I was reading this study that they said 65% of communication is nonverbal. And then people only remember 25 to 50% of what the conversation was about. And so what is it do you think that people get wrong when they're communicating?
I can't remember what you just said.
Funny. My ex-wife, my future ex-wife, there you go, right?
You lost me after welcome, Tim. I think that it's really active listening, paying attention to the cues somebody is giving you, and really trying to understand the emotion behind whatever the content is. And we kind of touched on it a little bit before. One of the things that I like to do to ensure my partner Deborah knows that I'm listening is I like to restate or paraphrase what the content and reflect the feeling. So if she's super frustrated about something, without trying to dive right into solving her problem, which is, by the way, is a massive mistake.
Huge.
Massive mistake. Don't do that. Resist the temptation. I'll say something like, if she sounds or seems frustrated about a given thing, like for instance, she works with someone on several different projects at a given time, and this person had canceled on her, okay, and canceled an appointment more than once, and she was a little bit frustrated about that. And I said to her, "Well, it sounds you seem really frustrated or upset because she keeps canceling on you." Exactly. And she'll go, exactly, and she'll just say, she'll unpack it more. And she'll continue to, so I'll find something else. And I'm actually really listening to her, okay? I am really listening to her, and I am really being mindful of what she's saying, and I am trying to be as empathetic as I can possibly be. But that restating or paraphrasing the content, the words, and reflecting the feeling back, particularly, I don't know about anybody else's experience, but I've done this with my daughters as well. Okay. And when I'm speaking to a female, this is golden. Okay. Well, as far as my experience.
Oh, absolutely. When you're out, if you're out, let's say you're out trying to pick up women or hitting on women or whatever it is, it's very powerful. I mean, all of it's powerful, but they really want to know you're investing in them.
Right.
Well, actually, anybody wants to know you're investing in them, especially when you get into problems or they're trying to sound off about something that's bothering them, as opposed to just general stories. I also repeating their name or putting their name in it, especially with strangers. That's very powerful too. It makes that connection.
Yeah. People like to know that you know who they are. So yeah, that's one of the things that I try to do, and I try to stay away from projecting anything that I may have experienced, projecting myself into what's going on, and in other words, making it about me.
Right.
Unless I'm asked, well, what do you think? And at that point, I might say, well, I read this over here about this particular thing, or I saw this over here about this. And I will try to
It doesn't work. Well,
Doesn't always. I'm not perfect. I can slip into the whole thing, the whole space of, hey, well, one time I was doing this and this is how I did, this is how I felt about it. Well, she really doesn't give a damn about how I felt about it.
Right.
She wants me to understand and effectively hold her feelings in my hands, for this period of time, if that makes any sense, what I just said. But she wants to share that with me, and then she wants to go and resolve it on her own. Basically, she's just talking it out.
Right.
It's a little more difficult when your significant other is talking about you.
Right. They should be asking questions though, rather than
because you got to be really careful when you're doing that, especially when they're talking. Well, I have to be really careful. First off, my wife is Deborah is very, very smart. Very smart. She's one of those, and she will not be manipulated. She will not be worked. And if I come off as I'm working her, oh boy, yeah, all bets are off. Forget about it. Dishes will start to be thrown.
But working and listening to somebody, those are elements of. Listening. It's interpretation, I guess, at that point, because. If you're hitting on somebody or trying to, work somebody, that's a different situation. But if you're with your spouse, are you really trying to work them unless you're trying to resolve a problem?
Well, that's the whole point of influencing. There's a whole book by Jeannie Laborde called Influencing with Integrity. Okay. And Rod Hairston and Tanya Rivera, I touched on the IC4 last time. They go through, hey, look, the moment you get into a situation where you're attempting to influence, you automatically have a conflict of interest.
Right.
You've got to be very, very careful about getting into manipulation. But I feel like manipulation can be a good thing if there's which is nothing more than influencing or persuading.
Right.
Okay. Especially if it has that party's best interest at heart.
Correct.
Okay. Something you would want to persuade your children to do.
Correct.
Something along those lines. But anyway, I think it becomes pernicious when you are making it about you and what you want. I've always said that selfishness is not living your life the way that you want to live it. Selfishness is, in fact, this is an Oscar Wilde. This is taken from an Oscar Wilde quote. Selfishness is when you make somebody else live their life the way you want them to live it. That's selfishness.
Yes.
Not when you want to do
Correct.
Your life your way. So, and I really believe that.
I agree with that. I never thought about that, but
I think that's true. So it can be, like I said, it becomes pernicious, particularly when you're manipulating with harm in mind. Okay, or ignoring the consequences of harm that could take place. So you got to be careful. And I'm always really careful about those types of things. I could tell you this though, with my kids, I was very sparing in my promises. Okay, and I don't believe I've ever broken a promise to one of my kids.
You always under promise and over deliver.
Yeah, but I did it for a reason. Okay, because when they got to an age where they could start making decisions, about doing things on their own. And I didn't want them I didn't think it was a good course of action, what they were deciding. I said, well, you can do that, but I promise you, this is going to be the outcome. That it would stop them dead in their tracks. To this day, my daughters will go, what do you mean by that, Dad? And they will stop and they'll just go, okay, Dad, what are you talking about?
Right.
And I'll say, hey, look, don't do this because of this. So, it's just one of those things, even when they never stop being your kids.
Well, but you're also, you're communicating consequences, but you've had the follow through on that. But what amazes me, and I've recently started studying this a little bit more, is body language. Mm-hmm. And there's so much accuracy in it that people don't understand it. I mean, everybody knows about your arms crossed in defensive pose. That's the easiest one. A woman plays with her hair, means she's interested. But I've tested out some of this stuff, and I've watched it in action. I remember I took this girl on a date, actually brought her back here, meet some friends, and I was sitting next to her on the couch, and the book I'd read said that if somebody's interested in you, they'll cross their legs so their leg is pointed
toward you.
No, away from you.
Away from you.
Because what that does is it shifts the body weight leaning towards you. Okay? So your leg, so if you're on my left, or if I'm on your left, you're going to take your left leg and cross it over your right knee, okay? Because now your body weight is shifted leaning into that person. The balance of your body.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So she was shifted the other way. Like her leg was crossed into me, or her weight was the other way. So I got up, went to get a new set of drinks for us, and then I sat on the other side of her to let's see if she shifts her weight. Sure enough, she shifted how her legs were crossed with the other way, so her body weight shifted the other way. I go, this isn't going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
But it was dead on accurate. And as it turned out, some other things happened that evening that reiterated that whole concept. So I became a new believer in that stuff, just watching it and testing it. The things I've heard is when you're talking to a woman at a bar, for example, if she's stroking the bottle and stuff like that, it's a phallic symbol. And I'm not making this stuff. Trust me, I'm not making this up. No. So that means there's interest. The other one I heard that's very popular, that if a woman has her legs crossed, but she's twirling her shoe, like coming off, it means she's envisioning basically getting her clothes off. And this is stuff that I've read. I'm not making this up. So there's a whole thing that goes in with this body language stuff. But also professionally, if you approach somebody in a business sense and you walk up to them, you never come at them head on, because it's very intimidating. It's confrontational. You should always be off to the left or just off to their side, so there's shoulder to shoulder, so that way you're not in conflict with that person, because it seems very confrontational and it's a red flag. The other thing is feet. What I've been hearing is one of the most underrated body language issues. So if you're talking about somebody and their feet are pointing toward the door, they're not interested in what you're saying.
Not at all.
And so that's another big red flag. So if you see somebody and their feet are pointed towards or away from the door, and I'm not talking about like a toe pointed. I'm talking like you can
both
see,
feet.
Yeah, they're looking at talking to you and they're looking away. But what amazes me is people aren't picking up on those things, even though everything is there. They're not seeing this,
right?
And people interpret that as how it makes them feel, because the body is sending off certain signals to that person. And if their body's turning away, that person's not making them feel good. But if they make you feel good, you're going to remember that, because your body's going to react to it in a natural way.
Well, I agree with that completely. Have you read about the one where if somebody is standing in front of you and their legs are like this, they're standing and their legs are crossed like this?
I've heard. I remember what that one means.
Okay, it means they're anchored. They're not going anywhere. They are totally with you.
You don't see that one often, though.
Yeah. Well, maybe you don't, but I do. I'm just kidding.
Wow, there's a shot across the bow. Guess I'm not paying enough attention to people. Shit.
No, I'm teasing.
Gotta
I'm
reread
teasing.
that book.
But I've seen it in interactions with men and women, and particularly I've seen it on TV. In impromptu situations where people are being interviewed. So yeah, it's the exact opposite of pointing your feet at the door, or pointing. For instance, if a woman is or a person, doesn't matter, is trying to make themselves available, they'll sit with their back to the bar, or they'll sit with their back to their friends, or they'll be more open toward an approach.
Correct.
Okay. Whereas if they are basically unavailable, what was that movie Hitch? Where he said to her, hair pulled back, eyeglasses, book, other than the fuck off tattooed on your forehead, I would say you're saying you're not available.
Yeah. And it's funny because so I love people watching. I just learn so much. I love the interaction. I love, especially being single and you're just out there. I try to be intentionally like unapproachable. I want resting bitch face out there, because I know if somebody comes up to talk to me, they're interested, right? So there's things I do that are different than I would before. Also, they make myself as wide as possible. There's that way, just leaning with confidence and spread your arms out a little bit instead of protective and stuff. I don't look like I don't look like a dick, but I'm trying to be, it's like, okay, I'm just out there, like, I'm cool with myself, just hanging out, which is really what I'm doing. I don't go out there to hit on women. I really don't. So I sit there and watch, and it's amazing how people will actually come up and talk to you, even when you don't want to be bothered, because they're interested, but they're interested because if they're going to go through that barrier
Right.
of you not being approachable, maybe I'm setting off the wrong signals or something like that.
Taking up a lot of space, right, is a territory, right?
But I'm also 6'4", so I'm naturally have a big wingspan anyways.
Yeah, but and that's even more so because you don't necessarily have to make yourself bigger in order to take up that territory. But effectively what you're doing is you're taking up territory. And that is an alpha move.
But it's a communication move. And not that I'm doing that on purpose.
And you're open.
Yeah, it's like, look, here, I'll talk to anybody. I can't hear shit when I'm in a bar scene because, and this is, I know a lot of people don't know this. I used to cover rock and roll way back when, right? And I had a flash pod blow up in my face at a rat poison concert. Not rat poison, but a poison / rat. I covered that show, and a flash pod blew up my face and fractured my eardrum. So I have 50% hearing in both ears. So it's very difficult for me to hear in loud situations like that. So I have to rely on body language a little bit more because I can't hear squat. All I hear is sounds like a bad speaker from a Burger King when taking an order. So I have to rely on that a little bit more to kind of read situations. So I guess maybe I'm open to that a little bit more. I have tinnitus in my ears. There's a constant ringing in my ears.
Oh, wow.
So I have that disability kind of against me. So hearing already sucks. And so I have to rely on those pieces probably more than the average person. So I'm a little bit more aware of them.
Yeah.
But like you were talking, when you're communicating with somebody, to show interest, you nod your head, eye contact, a big thing. If they look up, when you make a question, they're thinking about it, they look down a certain way, they're kind of lying, how fast they bat their eyes means they're telling. I mean, all that stuff comes into play. Sure. And if you're not aware of that stuff, you're missing out.
There's a whole development of IQs that Richard Bandler and John Grinder put together as part of the original NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And that came from, I believe, Donald Schoen and Edgar Schein, who were Donald Schoen especially was the father of PSYOPs in the U.S. military. And so big time interrogation. And one of the things is because of how your brain works, your left side is creative and your right side is logical. If you look up to your left, you're trying to access a memory. If you look up to your right, you're trying to make something up.
Interesting. I always look at it, you're looking down.
Yeah, the same. Well, looking down, if you're looking down like this to the right, all right, something is very, very meaningful to you. And you're trying to conjure up, express the right words or express the right feeling that something is giving you. It's a gut thing, okay? And then if you're looking down and to the left, you're attempting to access something that made you feel a certain way. You're remembering something that made you feel a certain way. And the same is true if somebody looks to the left or looks to the right. If they look to the right, they're making up something to tell you. If they look to the left, they're trying to remember what somebody told them to say. Okay? And so those are auditory cues. So it's very, very interesting, and it works. It absolutely works. Like, for instance, right now, don't think of a pink elephant. Right. And most people, when you do that, if you tell them or think of a blue cat, you will see their eyes go up to the right. They will go like this, and it'll just be a flash. And you will see it because they're trying to access what that looks like because it's not a memory. Okay, just try that. Try that sometime with some things.
I'm not going to do it now.
No, not now. But I mean,
I need a few more shots or something before that happens.
But it's crazy. And then some people in communication, and this is a big thing with communication. There are people who mainly see similarities with differences, and then other people who see differences with similarities. but the differences are the dominant. So the communication, in other words, this is where the whole idea of perspectives comes from.
Right.
Okay, and why at accidents, witnesses see different things. Okay, because that's part of the representational systems people have. And so there's all of that too. So it's very, very interesting. And if you actually go through a workshop on that and you find somebody who has differences with similarities and then put them together with somebody who's similarities with differences, it's crazy how they disagree about what they're looking at, even though it might just be a group of rectangles. It's no joke. I've watched it happen. It's crazy stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the human mind's just wild.
Yeah. So all of those things come into when you get into, and part of communication too, representational things. In other words, what something means to you, right? Because when we use words to communicate, because I can't open my head and show you the pictures I've got in my head. We think in pictures, and we represent the pictures in words, right? So we have our global beliefs, which are just the uniform beliefs that we've grown up with that have become a part of our belief system, right? And then we have our values, and we have our attitude. Our values support our belief systems. Then we have our attitudes, which is how we feel about our values, right? And it goes down this hierarchy. So all of those get expressed in communication. So, for instance, if you can tell just by the words somebody uses, by the language they're using, what their dominant representational system is. For instance, if you hear somebody say repeatedly, make things like, well, that's very clear to me. Okay, I really can't see that. They're telling you they are visually dominant. Some people will say that doesn't ring very true to me. And now they're auditory.
Right.
Okay, so when you're communicating with them, it's very, very helpful to get the true meaning and to have impact and effectiveness by, once you determine what those are, or you have a good feeling of what that is, to actually use that type of phrasing when you are communicating. And it's very, very effective because you are communicating in their native representational system. And it breaks down walls like that. So,
well, if more people studied how they communicate with others, like for example, I naturally speak, I'll mumble, and I'm from Detroit, Midwest. I typically will speak very quickly. And when I'm speaking at conferences, I have to focus so much on enunciating words better and slowing my speech down. In fact, as we do these podcasts, I have to focus on my rate of speech. I have to focus on a lot more in order to communicate more effectively, which is not natural to me because my natural instinct is to babble quickly and to mumble nasally, which I get from my father. That's how he was. That's how he communicated. That's what I've learned. So I will have to speak slower and focus on it a little bit more. But also, the art of communication involves listening more than it does speaking. And I don't think
absolutely.
People just don't do that. And one of the biggest things I've run into and have seen is that when you're talking with somebody, and you touched on this earlier, they turn it into themselves. And you're having a conversation. And I don't know the reason either. They've not gotten much attention in their life, or they're trying to form a bond with this person. Because let's say we're talking about skiing. Like, well, I've done this, and I'm a double black diamond skier, and I've skied all these slopes, instead of just talking about asking another person questions to try to form that bond. They're turning it into themselves. They're either trying to impress the other person, or they're trying to unnaturally form a bond, or they're trying to become an influence in that person. That's just been my experience. I've run into this situation a number of times where you're talking to a friend about a problem. You're saying, okay, I'm feeling a certain way. I just need your ear for a little bit. And you start talking with them. And then they either blow it off and say, don't worry about that. It's not a big deal. So they dismiss who you are. Wrong thing to say. They're not listening to the message you're saying. Then they turn it on to themselves and make it about them. Now the problem is not yours. They're trying to hijack the conversation when you've really invited them over to help you with a problem or situation. And it drives me insane. And then they start talking over the top of you on top of it. They're not listening to a goddamn word you're saying. They're thinking about themselves in that situation. And are they a true friend at that point? So my suggestion in those kind of situations, listen to what the person's saying, then ask them questions. Like you were saying before, so what you're saying is, paraphrase it, how do you feel about that? And then ask them why they feel that way. If you're a true friend, and people don't know how to communicate as friends anymore.
Yeah. Look, this goes back into, when I was here before, it was all about relationships, and we alluded to a lot of this, and we talked a little bit off camera about being an effective leader, an effective influencer, an effective coach, whatever it might be, right? And you've got to become what we talked about. If you want to be more effective as a leader, you've got to become a better person. Okay, so what you're describing to me is, and I talked in the last time I was here, I talked about Rod Hairston and Tanya Revere and how they developed the IC4, which is called an individual color 4. All right, and in it there's an II, an IE, an EI, and an EE. Okay, and the II is internally focused and internally motivated. Okay. So what they're thinking about is, what do I want out of this? And how does it affect me? How does this relate to me? Okay.
Makes sense.
Now, most of your leaders, CEOs, people that are real drivers, are internally motivated and internally focused. Okay. However, there is another high performance leader that is externally focused and internally motivated. Okay. But what you're talking about, somebody who makes it about themselves, hijacks the conversation, all of that is a native, okay, II, all right? And they've got to want, we've talked about this before too, where people who want to become better, they're either going to become better or they're not. They don't know how, they don't know, they have the tools, they don't have the desire, so they're not looking for tools.
They're not listening.
Correct. They don't even, and it's very easy for an II to dominate those situations, and they think oftentimes they're under the illusion that the person is just under their spell, and they're
It's
it
so
sounds
far
so
from the
bad.
truth. It's so far from the truth.
Right? They're being polite,
Right.
and oftentimes grudgingly polite. And this is the person who's got their toes pointed toward the door while they're looking you in the eye, right? And you're so about yourself that and this isn't being narcissistic. I'm not talking about narcissistic behavior. I'm talking about just the native character and personality trait of this person.
Right.
Okay. It's like asking a scorpion not to sting a frog. Okay.
Right.
And so they're not trying to be mean or trying to be self-centered or selfish. They're just trying to communicate in the way that's native to them. Okay, but it's not effective.
Right.
Which is why oftentimes they pair up very, very well with people who are externally motivated and externally focused, because those people are mostly concerned about connection, and they will do anything in order to keep the connection. Right. So in that case, a lot of the times, yes men and yes women, sycophantic people, they surround themselves with people like that that actually reinforce the bad behavior. Right. And their ego is so out of whack that they can't, they don't want to see it.
Well, they're insecure people too. They're getting that gratification from somebody listening to them when, like you said, they're being polite, but in reality, that person talking about themselves is really getting that affirmation that they so desperately seek. And the person that's listening going, they have an insecurity too.
I can tell you that the ones who are insecure are not true IIs. They're masked IIs. They're posing as an II. They're not really an II. Okay? They're really probably more an internally focused, externally motivated person. Okay? Which means that when they see everything going on around them, they think, how is this going to affect me? More so than what can I get out of this? Now that's a
fine line, right?
Yes, but it's critical distinction between the two. Okay. And an I, in all honesty, at the end of the day, doesn't give a shit whether you are what you think of them. Okay. Because they are internally motivated. They don't need your opinion. They know they're gonna do it. Okay. They're just driven. And quite often they have to, if they're smart, okay, and if they're sensitive and they try to exercise a modicum of self-awareness, they will actually see the damage they're creating. And the reason why I know this is because I'm an I. I was a highly, highly driven I. I was actually referred to as the world's only living heart donor at one point, okay? Like seriously, I did not give a shit what you thought. Okay, or what anybody thought. Okay, so, but I'm fully aware of some of the damage I caused. So going back to that, that's where the deep dive into all of this came from, and trying to be a better person.
And
that goes back to what your observation was. Excuse me, I didn't mean to, but I want to come back and circle back for people who are listening, that you innately, to your credit, I mean, your EQ must be, there's IQ and EQ, right? Emotional quotient. Right. Your EQ must be off the charts because and I'm not pumping sunshine up your ass here.
No,
I really mean this.
If you do, keep coming.
I really mean it because you innately referred to that several times. Remember what I said about the language people use, and you didn't say it the same way. Okay, and I noticed that when you were talking about this idea of becoming a better person. Okay, so you've got to want that.
Correct.
First.
Yep.
Okay, and for whatever reason. Probably through the motivation of my wife, just a strong Sicilian woman. I got the motivation to actually, hey, not everything is good here about what I'm doing. So a true I doesn't give a shit.
Well, by the way, thank you for the compliments. I appreciate that. And we were talking earlier about communication. And again, I've dated, been reintroduced in the dating world for a number of years now. And the communication styles of people have declined. The proficiency or the willingness to communicate. And communication, again, nonverbal. And nonverbal now, I guess texting would be verbal, kind of. That's taken away from the ability. I mean, even texting now, the verbal skills there or the communication skills are horrible because people don't have the respect of communicating back, or at least announcing. They'll ghost people all the fucking time.
I'm so glad you brought this up because I had this conversation today. Okay, no lie. You're from Detroit.
Yeah.
Okay, rough neighborhood. Grew up poor. I'm from Bell Gardens. Okay, so for those in the audience who don't know Bell Gardens, if you talk to a guy from Compton, like a hard dude from Compton, and you say Bell Gardens, he'll go, "Oh,
made me feel better about myself."
Yeah, no, it's like, "Oh yeah, no, Bell Garden." You might not come out if you go in there. So there's no consequences. In your neighborhood, if you, in our day, because we're roughly the same age, right. So in our day, if you popped off in the neighborhood, okay, you were going to catch a beating.
Yep.
All right? It's just real simple. You were going to catch a beating. So there was always, even if somebody parked their car and left it there, okay, yeah, there might not be anything left. It might be stripped when you come back to that car. Okay, but nobody would be overtly rude to you if you asked for directions to the gift shop that you were trying to find. They would help you along the way because maybe that helped them strip your car. But the point is that there was always this underlying code of respect. Like in our neighborhood, and I don't know if this is true about in your neighborhood, but you did not mess with someone's sister.
You mess with someone's family.
You did not disrespect someone's mom, and you did not disrespect someone's sister. And I mean like harass her or do anything like that.
Correct.
Because again, you were going to catch a beating. Mm-hmm. Okay? And so there was that. There isn't any of that anymore. Okay? Because you can hide behind a keyboard.
There's that. Everybody gets liquid balls all of a sudden, because they're anonymous. But take it one step further. Get safe places. There was no safe places back then. You know what safe places are? I don't like the way you're saying things to me. You hurt me, so therefore I don't want to hear it anymore. And they're so focused on how a message is delivered, or they're so looking at trying to be the victim, and they're looking for anything that fits that narrative instead of having an open dialogue. And we don't know how to communicate with people anymore. There is no more healthy discussions or healthy debates. You're labeled something if you have or have a certain belief. Whatever that belief is, you are put in a bucket, and you are a one-item bucket.
Yeah, I'm. It's really interesting that you would say that because, you have the right to free speech.
Correct.
Okay,
In
which is
theory.
communication. All right, you don't have the right anywhere to not be offended.
Correct.
All right, you're familiar with Jordan Peterson?
Yes.
Okay, so I loved Jordan Peterson's response to Kathy. I think her name is Kathy Griffith.
Yep.
Basically, he just blew her out of the water, okay? Because she said, why is your right to free speech greater than my right to not be offended? He said, because in order to think, you must risk to think and speak what you're thinking, you must risk offending someone. And then he turned around and he said, look, you're pursuing the truth, yada, yada. You're not worried about offending me, and more power to you. That's your job. He goes, but why should you be the one that gets to do that? It's been rather uncomfortable. And she was like, you've got me. He said, yeah. But anyway, so yeah, there's communication. There's positive consequences. I think that with what's going on in society, particularly with social media and bullying from the keyboard, okay? Yeah. First, communicating from the keyboard in 147 characters, we've lost our ability to articulate what we're thinking and what we're feeling in a tactful way. And I'm not saying about in a politically correct way, a tactful way. The art of tact has been lost.
100% agree.
To say things directly without offense. Okay? That's number one. So interpersonal skills have been denigrated by this. All right? So that's the first thing. That's one negative consequence. The second thing is there's been no reinforcement for positive manners, okay, or positively pursuing a conversation or communicating what you might think or feel. There's been nothing in terms of there is no positive reinforcement for that, and so therefore all of the responsibility, or a better word, accountability for your words, okay, because of the negative consequences, let's say like from our neighborhood, are gone. Okay, you don't have to worry about that because you can post whatever you want on Facebook or social media, and you can do that without, you might have some people trolling you or so-called bullying you, in print, but who cares? They're not in your face. You know what I mean? And it's like words are now violence, and words are now aggression and violence and whatever you want to call it. Okay. And this is the first sign of radicals, whether they be from the right or from the left, going too far. This is the encroachment onto natural, and I'm going to say natural because some people are atheist and agnostic and whatever. Some people would say God-given rights, but I'll say natural rights. As a person, as a human being, okay, it's your right to express yourself. However, you must be accountable for your words, which is why in the Old West, and I'm not fabricating this or being romantic about this. Look, there's a reason why in Texas in 1845 or 1850, if you called a man a liar here, it was a shooting matter. If you called a man a thief, it was a shooting matter. Okay? Because you were ostracized from the community. And if you were ostracized, you were effectively in massive danger between the Kingfisher gang, the Kiowas, the Comancheros, the command, all of that. You were effectively a dead person. Okay? And so that's the whole point of being accountable for the words you speak.
Right. And I 100% agree with what you're saying here, but I think it goes one step further. Nobody is willing to, and now we get into the self-improvement section, because nobody wants to be held accountable. Nobody wants to admit they're wrong. I mean, now you get into ghosting. Again, it drives me insane that people will ghost you on text. And I run across this a lot in the dating world right now. It's just all of a sudden you have these texts, or you've had a great date or a couple of great dates, and all of a sudden it just falls off. The pattern changes. You say, hey, can we jump on a call? They ghost you. They don't ghost you. And you shouldn't have to work that hard. Just say, hey, I'm not interested. Cool. Get it. I would never do that to somebody. And then if you're called out, say, well, why did you do that? They won't answer, because they don't want to be responsible for their actions. And when you call somebody out on that stuff, they're not used to that happening. It's like they're pinned into a corner, and they will unleash on you just this verbal assault and insults. Like, wait a minute, I was just trying to get some understanding of what happened here, because why? Just explain what happened. I don't care. I'm trying to improve myself. And we talked about this earlier, off the mics, is that when you don't respond to somebody's questions, or let's say you're ghosting somebody, if it's not working and that person's reaching out to you, you're creating two victims. First victim is the person that's blowing it off and not answering, because you're not growing as a person. You don't know how to handle conflict resolution. You don't know how to gently let somebody down, or you don't know how to express yourself. You just say, screw this, I'm out, or I'm not interested, but I don't want to hurt him, or I don't want to be hurt because it's something I did. The other one is the other person that you're not responding to. In my case, I like closure in situations. Like, just tell me what happened, because I want to improve. If it's something that I offended you in, great, let me know. I want to make sure that for the next person, I want to be a better person myself. So I want to understand what's happening. But people don't want to do that anymore, because they don't want to be bothered with responsibility or know how to communicate in an effective way, because everything's on text, keyboard. They won't look somebody in the eye and say,
oh, no, there's no doubt about that.
They won't pick up the phone and call. They won't do it.
Yeah.
And it's really sad that as a society now, that we have forgotten how to speak with people directly and respectfully, and even have debates to understand the other side. It's just like, you're wrong, you're a piece of crap, and I'm not going to talk to you. I mean, you see this every day.
Do you think that might have a little bit to do with the idea of everyone's a winner, everyone gets a trophy?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because you don't have to deal with, in this particular case, with in situations in which you risk losing or risk being uncomfortable.
You know what? But your feelings hurt. That's what it's all about. That's what safe place. What the fuck's a safe place? I'm from Detroit. There was no safe place.
This goes back to, when I was here before and we were talking about, grit.
Oh.
Okay. And grit is the passion to, I've always said, if you have a big enough why, you can put up with any what. Okay. And it's not having that big enough why, that grit to deal with being uncomfortable. There is too much. Look, let's just face it. Okay. I think personally, based on what I see and I don't even know what generation this would be, X, Z, ZZ. I have ZZ Top. I have no idea. Okay. But and I don't mean that disrespectfully. Okay. But what I do see is I do see an awful lot of coddling. Okay. Yes. I think parents are I see a lot of this. Okay. Being, I'm not even going to say that. Okay. But let's just say that I am around kids. All right. And I see a lot of parents trying to be friends with their children.
Right. Can't do it.
Not your job. If that happens later on, awesome. But that's not the job. Right. Okay. It's much more serious than that. And I think that has something to do with it as well. Because if you're not willing to put your child through the incremental crucible, incremental steps within the crucible of character development to deal with uncomfortable situations and deal with it tactfully, respectfully, and with emotional control, or in other words, maintaining your poise, okay? You're creating a victim. I've always said that if you give your children, the more you give your children, the more you cripple them. it becomes the crutch they lean on. And then there's once they get older, there's a little bit of entitlement there.
Absolutely. And that in communication is where it all starts.
Oh, no, I agree with that completely.
But communication has so many things. It's in the dating world. It's in your interpersonal relationships with your friends, with your kids, with your spouse, with professionals. I speak at conferences occasionally, so you have to be able to communicate to a larger audience in certain body movements, and you have to be aware of everything, and you have to be able to read that situation.
Right.
And we have forgotten that. And somebody that can communicate well is cherished. People seek them out.
Sure.
But the problem is when those people seek them out, they don't know how to respond, so they kind of lose that ability because they're not focused on themselves and listening. And it all starts with listening. First of all, it's communication, and then listening is the number one thing. So you've been in sales, I've been in sales. The key number one thing is listening.
Yes.
They'll tell you what it takes to sell them.
Yeah, I've said that if you walked into 1,000 sales meetings, 999 of them, the meeting will be going wrong, because in all of those meetings, the salesperson will be talking.
Yep. If you're
That is
talking
the
too
worst
much,
thing you can do.
you're not selling.
The quality of the questions you ask is going to dictate the quality of the answers. So when like for instance, when I'm trying to work with somebody and I have an acronym, EARN. Okay.
Okay. Encourage,
affirm, remind, notify. Okay. So like you like to ask open-ended questions. Okay. So for instance, I might ask if you were on my sales team, say, I would go, so how do you feel about how do you feel about the prospecting efforts that are going, that you're doing right now? How you feeling about that? You feeling like that's 100?
Right.
Okay. Well, really? They might say, no, I don't. Huh. Well, I'm kind of surprised. Why would you feel like it's not? What's going on that you're feeling that way? And so those are open-ended questions to draw out, and to foster communication. Because if you're a leader, okay, and your job is to lead and or fix the problem, if you don't know what the problem is, then you can't fix it.
Correct.
And really, it's like with coaches and with leaders, you're not the authority figure, you're a guide.
Right.
And so what you have to do in those situations, in this particular situation, is to just simply share what you see so that they can have that picture in their head and go, oh, well, coach, how can I fix that? Well, here, what do you think the options are for doing this, that, or the other? But in terms of circling back to what you said with the texting and ghosting you, I'm an II. Okay. So for me, there's always been, I've always felt like, and by the way, I haven't dated anybody in 40 years.
Right.
Okay. But I've had lots of relationships, and my thinking on ghosting, right, is this. If I don't hear back from you, I will assume that you don't want to continue with any type of communication. And I would express, I'm confused, and not that I don't want to force you to get into anything, but I'm a little bit confused, and I was hoping you could share with me why.
Right.
I'm not going to try to talk you out of that.
Right.
But I would just like to know why. But if you don't want to, then I would assume you don't really care that much.
Right.
And that's it.
Right.
And I would move on.
Yeah. I mean, now that gets into a whole different arena with relationships and dating and all that other stuff. But at the end of the day, if you're not responding to phone calls or texts, that's like the modern day middle finger.
Yes.
But it's also because people haven't been taught how to communicate with each other. And so it comes to respect for other people. Again, it's about them. This is what's happening in society in general.
Sure.
But if you're going to be a good friend, and then we'll wrap this up, but you got to listen first. And I like your attitude of the EARN, but you also listen, you paraphrase, repeat back, but ask them questions, because sometimes people just need a good friend. They just need to offload. They don't want to be told what to do, and don't give them advice unless they ask for it. So, well, you should be doing this and this. That's not what they want to hear.
Yeah.
Something, if they ask you, what should I do? Then tell them, don't tell them what to do. Everybody wants to live somebody else's life in the process during the communication. You're talking with them.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And one of the things that I try to do is I try to remember to say, look, if you're asking me what you should do, I don't know what you should do. I can only tell you based on everything you've told me, assuming that everything you've told me is correct. I have no reason to believe it's not. Internalizing it, I can only tell you what I would do.
Correct.
Okay? You could do whatever you feel like you need to, but this is what I would do. I'm not telling you what you should do. And that's a little bit better than going, well, what you should do is this, which I tend to do with my kids.
Right.
You should do this. It's just that doesn't go well.
Absolutely. So Tim, thank you so much. We're going to wrap this up. But,
no worries.
Another great conversation with you. They're always deep and meaningful and probing. So I want to thank you very much for joining us. And remember to live, love, and enjoy life. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.